Tū mai te ata o herere te tapu, tau mai te Māori, ki runga ki Hine araki kia tū. Kia ora koutou and welcome to ACE Kōrero on empowering community engagement in New Zealand elections. Ko Tai toko ingoa. My name is Tai and I work for ACE Aotearoa as the ACE Sector Capability Manager. I will be facilitating today's kōrero and it is my honour to welcome our panel members today, Peter Potaka, Hine and Peter Foaese. I just wanted to share a little bit about each of our panel members, but this is just a snapshot of the work they do in our communities. I'll start with Peter Potaka. He's affiliated with Te Haunui a Paparangi Ngāti Raukawa and Te Whānau a Apanui Iwi, maintains strong ties with Hungarehu and Pariki no Marae on Awa Tupua or Whanganui. Serving at the Electoral Commission since 2014, he initiated a community-led approach post the 2017 general election. The successful pilot program during the 2020 general election paved the way for its implementation in all New Zealand electorates for the 2023 general election. This program underscores the Electoral Commission's commitment to fostering community participation in New Zealand elections. Next, I'd warmly like to welcome Hine. She brings over 25 years of multifaceted involvement in adult and community education. Her rich experience spans governance, management, policy development, training and administration. She's been a pivotal member of the Tairawhiti REAP Aotearoa and ACE Aotearoa boards. Hine's leadership shone through her management of Tairawhiti REAP ACE. She initiated successful programs, notably the Active Citizenship Initiative in Wairua. This effort significantly boosted participation in the 2013 Wairua local government elections. Hine's remarkable talent lies in her ability to engage rural communities, positively impacting adult learners. Beyond education, she served in local politics for 3 terms, including a deputy mayor role, promoting civic engagement and the power of proactive citizenship. And thirdly, Peter Foaese. He's a youth worker and a community educator, presently serving as the South Pacific Executive Council member for ASPE. And his role as a community and young persons engagement specialist at the New Zealand Office of the Children's Commissioner, he's dedicated to empowering marginalised youth and their families, enabling them to transform their situations and the broader system. Peter has also contributed to Whakaoho and Pacific All-Stars, youth-led initiatives within family and community contexts. His excellence in adult education is reflected in his delivery of civic education workshops to adult educators for many years, and notably he's a recipient of the ACE Aotearoa Member of the Year Award. Let's give the panel members a chance to introduce themselves, and following that I'll start our kōrero with a few questions. So I invite Peter Potaka to introduce yourself.
Hi, ko te Ati Haunui a Paparangi me te wana a Apanui ki Peter Potaka. I'm currently employed by the Electoral Commission, and it's a role that that's evolved over the last 5 or 6 years, and looking about how we might deploy a community-led approach to engaging with communities and improving services for Māori. That has been my focus.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Hine.
Morena, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, ko Hine hau, no ngā puia hau, I nei nohana ki Wairua, kei te mahi ahau ki te Tairawhiti REAP. I'm delighted to be here or to have been invited to participate in this Empowering Community Partnership panel and look forward mostly to the questions of those who have registered from us as panelists. I do have an extensive background in the urgency and need for our whānau to actively engage to determine their future in this democratic process. The process I'm very opinionated about, but because of the deprivation of communities that we live in and the marginalisation of those who do not participate. So, kia ora mai tātou.
Kia ora, Hine. And Peter Foaese.
Mōrena i te whānau, ko Peter toku ingoa, Ngāti Hā mō te iwi, ko whaliula me vai longa hapu, malo lovely soifua I nei tai au manuia, momoli atuli whawhita I a tai mali au o Ace Aotearoa mo never know. Just a massive thank you to Tai, and Viv and the Ace Aotearoa team for these opportunities. They don't exist in many spaces, and I think that this is a great thing that we're having this kōrero and this talanoa this morning. I'm really privileged and honored to be seen as a person that can contribute to a space like this, especially alongside Mātua Peter and Hine, because I believe that one of the biggest ways that we can change up the way we do civics or encouraging people to vote is to have intergenerational conversations and to learn from the giants that stand and have created ways for our peoples to come through. And so I'm just really grateful to be here. Thank you.
Aloha, Peter. Thank you very much. I mean, it's our honour to have you all three of you here today. So let's just crack into it and start with the first question. So the first question is, what are some successful examples of community engagement initiatives in previous New Zealand elections, and what are some of the lessons we can draw from those? So I will start with Peter Potaka.
Oh, kia ora, kia ora. Yeah, and Hine will be able to make comment about that from a community's end of this, our story. Look, in 2020, we put in place a pilot program to improve services to Māori, and it was all about improving services to Māori. What we did was we developed what we call a community-led approach. In 2018, we went out and we talked to we listened more than talk, we listened to communities, and they told us about their voting experience. And believe me, it wasn't a great story. And we went to places, we were in Wairoa, we were at Kaiti, we were in the north, we went to Huntly, we also went to South Auckland, West Auckland. So we covered quite a number of communities from different, with different rural versus urban type communities. And we listened and they told us what we needed to do, and we called to improve voting for services. And we called that our narrative, and we went out to change that narrative. But what we found along the way was we were asked to do things like find the best places in the community that are especially places of significance to locate your voting venues in. We didn't know that. So we went back again and we said, hey guys, we accept this. To change this, we need to work with you, and we need to listen to your advice about where we might place these voting places. And one of the other things they told us was we weren't employing people from the community. They'd go along to vote and they wouldn't see people from their community represented in that group of people who were running the service. They told us it was a very cold and not very inviting environment. We didn't really give people, we didn't welcome them in any way. It was just about a business transaction, and that wasn't working for Māori. And so we worked with with people from the community. They told us where we should go. Some of them even took us around and introduced us to people. And we then, we took that advice where we could, because we then had that on the ground discussion about why some places weren't suitable. We had to make sure about access, and we had a lot of things that we needed to share with people, but they then understood and often would say, hey, go here rather than there, go over to this place. And so we did that, and we helped our electorate managers to make those changes and work with the local communities to change the narrative, to improve the service for Māori. We did some things. First thing we learned was we had to get rid of our one-size-fits-all approach. We had a service that worked for 70% of the population. It was anchored in Pago values and in the way Pago people wanted it to work. And that really worked for them. And we thought we're providing a good service, but we heard from this round of hui that it wasn't working for Māori. And so when we set about working and promoting some of these changes, we learned a lot that we're taking forward. You know, first of all, the experience of working with community people changed the narrative. We couldn't have done it on our own. Getting the location of the voting place right was only one element. We needed to talk about when was the best time to open that place, you know, and so these sorts of things. And we also learned how we could challenge our recruitment processes. We deployed and we're still trying to get that right. We depended online applications. You know, we expected people to go online. We were told very clearly, not everyone has the same level of access to the internet. Not everyone has a computer in their home, and that it's not easy to go and access a community place to go and get that. So we had to change those thinking around that. What we learned was that in many places where we did employ Māori, they took it on as a personal crusade to encourage their whānau to come along and get involved. The young ones we had, before they went to work, they'd send out over their Facebook pages and say, come on, you lot, I know you haven't voted, come down here. And so they did that, and it took on a life of its own. And we also found that, you know, people were prepared to work on behalf of their communities to help us make changes. And one of the other things, I guess, from internally was, yeah, we still haven't learned how to take advice. We still presume in many places to know what's good for the community without checking out and walking in their shoes. So overall, it was successful. Where we worked together, the changes were really, really significant. And, you know, Hine was one of the people who helped us in Wairoa. And interestingly, we were told we didn't look after rural communities very well. So we located early voting options for them right across. We were told we didn't employ the people from the community. And, you know, we were lucky to have employed 20% of Māori in 2017. Well, in 2020, it went up to about 65, 70%. And people were really, really, they were happy to get in there, and they made a difference. We had this view internally that you needed prior experience to work in a voting place and to run one. We kicked that to touch. We had first-time people. They provided an amazing service. And it wasn't just for Māori, it was for everyone who walked in that door, experienced the awhi, the manaki, and, you know, they were greeted, it was warm, people were helped. So, you know, overall, we were pretty pleased. And that's why we've rolled it out now, right across every electorate in this country. And how successful we are, we'll find that out in a couple of weeks. And we also learned that I'll talk a bit later about that, our kaupapa Māori voting places. That's a new initiative. We're no blueprint, but we're learning every day, but we're getting there. So those are some of the key learnings and that we're taking forward. And we've actually pulled those learnings together in a video that it's based in Highbury out of Palmerston North. And that is what we use to engage and get our electorate managers motivated. And it tells the story of the work we did, and it was from the community end. And, you know, the pride in those voices was just absolutely amazing, because it was their work, not ours. It was theirs that made the difference.
Thank you, Peter. As you can see today, we have passionate people around us, so we will carry on. I loved how you said the word listen, and I loved how you said make changes. I think that's a good learning. Sometimes we listen and go, oh yeah, but my way's the best way. I love it. Hine, tell me about some initiatives that you have been involved in and successfully.
Thank you, Tai. I'd just like to acknowledge Peter for the Electoral Commission to even making it your business to come back to communities, especially rural communities where there's high population of Māori. And, you know, music to my ears, some of the words that you said to me that bring significant, and that tells me that the Commission really do get it, is when you are able to employ people who reflect the very communities for whom they serve. This isn't a business transaction. I know personally for little communities like ours, when you involve the right people, it does become a personal crusade. I have an absolute belief, Ty, and to those of you who are registered, that if we don't find an emotional reason for people to vote, especially those who are marginalised, then they will not. So small communities understand who their people are. And I'm talking from a Māori perspective, and that's not excluding other groups. It's just because that's where the vulnerability lies. So I do appreciate the work that the Commission did at that time, Peter. One of the questions that I have on the side and for us to think about is that the Electoral Commission does stand alone. So in that context, Peter, I would really like to ask then, do they have the autonomy to make change happen as we might determine just through having this hui today? I don't expect you to answer me today, but I do believe that that's a trigger for us to consider. So from a community perspective and some of the initiatives that we picked up, again, it was from, these were emotionally drivers and levers for us in Wairoa. One particularly that I mentioned is, was in the 2013, where we had very low voter turnout in the previous election. This is local government elections. And there was some talk about amalgamation, which would mean that 5 councils would amalgamate. Wairoa, with the highest Māori population, the furthest geographical distanced from urbanisation, social parameters that no one else would experience because of our locality and our high deprivation. And deprivation I call because it's the government's deprivation tool that determines we're deprived at a level, not the communities. You ask anyone in our community, are you deprived? They'll say, no, I'm broke. I need 2 new tyres. I can't afford it. So again, this is the government's language. This is how they determine profiles for communities. So at the time, we knew it was really important, and there were only 2 people in our community, 2 leaders in our community, who knew we had to do more than just people to receive a ballot paper in their mailbox. So it was a personal crusade, one of mine, and it was the local mayor at the time, I have to say, that if we didn't do our part to ensure that our whānau understood what might happen if we were to amalgamate, and then they could make the decision, then we would not have participation by our community. So we brought in some rangatahi who made up a song that would capture our community. They stood in front of the lighthouse and sang and engaged Māori, kaumātua, young ones, the college, who in this 1.5 minute video had a greater spread of why whānau should participate in the election, in the voting process, than ever before. And so proceeding, as a consequence of that, the very next elections, our whānau voted. We had the 2nd highest voter turnout in local government elections in that election year than ever. So that didn't happen by accident. So I guess my narrative is, if we do what's necessary, we can mobilise our people. Kia ora.
Thank you, Hine. I liked how you're talking about the emotional reason to vote, and we might come back to that question.
Sure.
It's a interesting question, how to trigger that emotion, especially if there's, you had an amalgamation of local governments happening. Sometimes people just don't see anything in the election process for themselves. They feel powerless. So we'll let that percolate in your brains. But Peter, can you share with us some community engagement initiatives that you've done or been involved in?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to share a quick quote from Neil Post. I read it the other day, and it's children are the living messages we send to a time we will not see. And it's I found it quite beautiful because, and it relates to this because I I tautoko what you're saying, Hine. It's not about what we can do right now straight away. It's actually the intergenerational journey of our community initiatives and resourcing community initiatives at the grassroots to build the village around Mokopuna and to tautoko and awhia Mokopuna to be involved in decision making so that they feel confident enough to go and vote. Because a lot of the kōrero that we've had with rangatahi has been that when they get to 18, all of a sudden they've put to this decision and said, you know, go vote for who's going to lead the country, and they're like, what the, I can't do that. That's not, I don't even know who that person is and everything, or you know, what's going on here, what is a vote, etc. But actually what has proven to work in community initiatives is that the intergenerational kōrero, where Mokopuna are part of the village, and that they already are starting to see themselves as decision makers and voters way before the vote, leads to a positive voter turnout. And recognizing that the 2020 election, there was that 18 to 20% jump within those cohorts between 18 to 35, demonstrated that is that a lot of the people, I've worked with young people for 16 years, a lot of the people, when we first started talking to them about supporting young people to understand what their rights were and what voting meant and being part of their whānau hapu iwi back in 2013, we're sort of like, why though? You know, like, what does that do? And so all of that work that started back then came out in 2020. You know, we had the 2-year program where the mayor's task force or the mayors choose and mentor a rangatahi Māori for a whole year. And those rangatahi Māori go to the mayor and sit with the mayor, and they get mentored, and then they go back out to the communities and they tautoko and awhi their peers to understand what's going on in local government. That initiative bore fruit, you know, in 2020, because that cohort grew up and their peers grew up all together. And then when they came to the vote, they were all like confident enough to feel that. And I agree, it's an emotional trigger that we need to inspire in our young people, that it's actually more than just that tick. It's about your conversation with your parents and to understand what's happening with, you know, water rights, or, you know, to understand what's going on with the forest, or, you know, and then that conversation leads to them recognizing that their pepeha is connected to their vote, and their vote is connected to their pepeha. If you believe that your maunga is your maunga, and you believe your awa is your awa, then when you go to choose the person that represents you and represents that maunga and that awa, that emotional connection leads to a greater voter turnout. And I just wanted to mention a few other initiatives that led to positive voter turnout. Was the Pacific Youth Leadership and Transformation Project, initiated in Christchurch, which had Pacific young people 7-8 years ago coming together and talking about what civics change was. And that has led to a bigger voter turnout within that Pacific cohort in Christchurch. And one other is a school strike for change. We saw a lot of our children, young people, starting to take climate change really seriously, you know, in 2018 and 2019. And they were going out and they were protesting and saying, we need to take climate change seriously. And that turned into children, young people who became of age at 18 in 2020, actually saying, we're going to make a decision now because we need to choose who leads our country in this space. And so I believe all of that intergenerational kōrero that occurred over the years before 2020 contributed to the fact that we had a greater voter turnout in that 18 to 35 age group.
Thank you, Peter. My understanding is if we can get them to vote as soon as they're at the voting age in the first election, then that creates a pattern. So I like the idea of that pre-voting education or motivation or inspiration to get people into the idea of what it actually means for them personally, rather than it's a box I'm ticking because someone told me I should be ticking it. The question that's just come out of that kōrero is around the key people in your community, or the influencers. How do you find those people? Where do you find them? Who are those people? I'm going to start with you, Hine Flood, because I would call you an influencer in your community, but how do you find those people to engage with, to get people motivated, or to rally the troops, per se?
Okay, so this is not a criticism, it is a reality. It is not with the leadership. Because I cannot comprehend this. It irritates me that those who have positions of authority are not allowed to declare who they might vote for and why, because their position, and I get it, you know, funding comes from government agencies and therefore you must kind of toe the line. But if these leaders are in positions for a reason, it's because our whānau and community trust them to have those roles. So when you're silent on a kaupapa that is so important, especially to Māori and Pacifica, I have an issue. Because if we can't be promoting a party that will do the best for our people, in our view, then my question is, why not? So you won't find the influences in our leadership for that reason. The influences are in our community. They are the people who have a natural or an organic outreach to whānau. They're the influences. So my job is to influence or to stand alongside those who I know will be able to touch the hearts of people to participate in this thing that ain't sexy. It's just, you know, not. So, and you talk about tuia, Peter. We have a current tuia representative I can see online right now. But if I can guide with my experience the younger generation to ignite, to, you know, whakaka te pitumata, to ignite that their puku to think, now I get it. I want to do this stuff. Then that's my job. So the influencers, we already know who they are. It's about, do we have the time to reach out and touch them and inform them? So can I just give a quick example? The census that is this year that was conducted, Cyclone Gabriel impacted the communities right across the East Coast. I knew, and I'm going to talk about myself, I knew how significant and important it would be for our community to participate and engage in the census, the 2023. We were lucky to hit 50% response in return. Now that Wairua will suffer because we didn't participate. So when there's no visibility of leadership, when all the funding that comes from government agencies by the people who we vote in, and they determine who will be the government agency, where that money will flow and how it will be distributed, that money, we are invisible. So when we talk about a voting process, this includes how we engage in what's good for our people. So I include the census conversation and corridor in this very same context. And I'm unapologetic about that. So if we're engaging our whānau, they have a better understanding of why things need to be done. We had a loss of $17 million to our community purely because we had only 70% of our community contribute or have a return on the census previously in 2016. Not good enough. But our whānau don't know that. I don't blame them for not engaging. I blame us. I don't know if I answered your question. I can't even remember what it was. Sorry.
That's so good. Yeah, I mean, it was around influencers.
Influencers.
I mean, you want to hear from the mouth of an influencer. Thank you, Hine. You answered that question. Peter Potaka, I know that that's part of your role, to find the people to listen to. So how do you find them in different communities? Because I know that you're not in all of the communities personally. So how do you find them?
Yeah, well, it's finding influencers. It's been at the heart of our community engagement approach, and to be fair, I took it. We introduced it in census, and I took it across to the commission in 2014. And what we we found people in the communities who had a real strong background in providing services for their communities, and we sat down and we talked to them about, you know, these communities, and we ended up employing them and saying, right, your job is to, you know your community, you know who the people are trusted, who are the trusted sources of information. And, you know, we stopped trying as a government agent, set of government agents, to go out and tell people what was good for them. You know, we had to put that aside. We had to get out there, and we found those people who had influence, but we had to convince them that our kaupapa was actually a good kaupapa, and it was worth it, had value to their community and to them. And when we got over that, and we got some understanding, my network of advisors would then sit and listen and find out how they could support that influencer to tell the story that would resonate with their community. And they were different in every instance. And then they would accompany to a hui. The influencer would stand up and engage, and often we ended up with our advisor with the technical information, and people were listening. They were taking advice, because the person who had introduced that individual, who had introduced the kaupapa, was a trusted source. And they had, you know, they were renowned for the work they did with their communities, and people would listen. And, you know, you think back even Hine, to our first hui, you know, after we'd taken the good old bashing that we deserved, because it was the first time that many people had sat down and shared a meal with the CEO of a government organisation and the big boss, and they listened. And then it was pretty clear who the influencers were in that room, you know, or where people looked to check, you know, are we bloody bullshitting, or what, you know, what's going on? And then, so we had people like Hine, we had, you know, the queer Hine whānga, you know, and they trusted those people. And so it was about that, you know, again, it was relationships. It was being seen to listen and not bring our own kaupapa to that place. And it was just accepting that it was okay to have different solutions for different communities. Just work with them.
Thank you. So I'm going to change tack a little bit. Peter, Foaese, I'm going to get you to answer this one first. So influencers, that's a common word in social media, and those sorts of things. So do you have any ideas on how to use social media to engage with people around the election process or civics education?
I saw this question in the list of questions, and I was like, I didn't want to answer this one because I'll sort of explain why. I think people look at social media as the golden answer to engaging our communities, and the reality is that it is one of the tools in the kete to engage communities. But if you aren't already talking to some people, they're not going to engage you there. And it's that whole, you can go out far and wide, but unless you have the right people who are reflected in your social media, why would they talk to you online if they're not already talking to you in your community? And so it is definitely a way to amplify, but you can't amplify if you haven't already started a korero. You know, unless there's already a conversation happening in spaces, and especially for our mokopuna. One of the things that COVID showed us is that when young people were taken online to do their learning and everything, everyone assumed that the messages we were giving them from the government, they were going to look at. But if you're sitting online and you've got this window to the world, why would you choose to go read this thing from the Ministry of Health when actually you can go to a million different windows, and you know, your whole world is there? And so I wanted to quickly answer that last question, because I've always had a bit of a tension with the term influencer. It places this assumption that there's these people out there that have the straight ability to actually just influence, but actually I believe that when we go out to engage our communities, yes, we need to be talking to our rangatira, but actually the people that we need to be talking to are actually the kaifatu, the weavers of the communities, and they're not always the same people.
Yep.
The leaders definitely are on the pipeline, they're speaking and making decisions, but actually those that are in the kitchen and those that are sitting, you know, in the back chairs, you know, who are actually the ones that go out into the whenua on behalf of their rangatira to weave together things, those are the people that actually we need to be talking to. And the reason why is our rangatira are busy. And so they probably meet 500, 600, 700 different people, you know, in a month. But actually the kaifatu, the weavers of the kōrero, are the ones that are in the ears of our leaders saying, hey, remember this, we need to go to that, you know, like how do we weave together community spaces? And when I've spoken to kaifatu or the weavers or the people that rāranga, they don't like being seen as influencers because there's this power dynamic that comes with that term influencer. To them, they're like, actually, no, I'm a connector of people. I just want to bring people together. And so going out and meeting with our kaifatu, often the ones that will connect us to the rangatira and then help us to facilitate conversation. And then the rangatira will go away and they say to us, go back to that person and they'll help you with whatever, you know, and often it is the, you know, the auntie Hines or the uncle, you know, Peters who are those people. And so going back to that social media conversation, there's 1,000 upon 1,000 platforms and apps and widgets. I've just recently learned about Miro board, where you can jump onto like a board and have like 16, 17, 18 people all on there moving around post-its, having conversations and analyzing information. But one thing that's important is how do you get those 16, 18 people onto the Miro board? Like it's like you can't start there. You got to actually go and do the work. And so I think it's a connection of the two things is, one, do the right genuine thing by going to the marae, going to the church, sitting in those spaces and being real with those people so they can see that you're genuine. And then once you've done that, work with them to create your social media campaign, and they will be the ones that weave it out into the community and not you. I think that you'll get both greater bang for your buck, but also people will come when they know it's their weavers that are weaving the kōrero online and not you.
Oh, great. I like those terms, kaifatu and community connectors. So let's just scrap the word influencer and leave it to the social media people.
Yeah.
And let's carry on with community connectors. Peter Potaka, do you use social media to help promote engagement?
No, we haven't to any extent, but one of the learnings we had from the 2020 pilot was that, there is a place that we shouldn't assume that everyone gets their information from our main sources, you know, from our media campaigns, from the paper, from the news, and watching the orange guy do his thing, and that people don't get their information from there, and we were learning where people went. And sometimes it was, you know, they'd network with trust members, with runanga, with whānau groups, with marae groups, and they were sourcing a lot of their information from people they knew rather than having a guest who might have said this. And so we encouraged people, especially where we had Māori, we encouraged them. And what we did, Hine, and I don't know, I hired Maria in Wairoa. She did a little project and she identified all of the Facebook, all of the, you know, the council, how did the council reach out, how did the runanga, and so we thought when we set out with the task that she'd find, you know, she thought, oh, there must be about 20 plus. Well, there were 170 or something. You know, when by the time you look at all the different whānau networks and on Facebook, and she also then contacted people where they had some control. And what was interesting, we found even, you know, the buy and sell online thing group in Wairoa, so many people, and they were really open. If we could to provide some messages, they wouldn't let anyone go in, as you well know, but they were actually open to us using that to distribute information to people who might go on and buy and take that opportunity to one click is all it needed. So it was really interesting, and I've got all that information, and you know, I'm asking the electorate manager to be open to that, to encourage people when we, you know, from next week on. It's no good going a month in advance. We need to go, you know, hey, get down there, voting tomorrow, team, you know, or starts on Monday. And these are the people who are going to be there. And because there was another thing, getting those names out into the community so people knew. And they went along because they knew those people. So, yeah, it's something we need to do better at, but I think it's the local level that we want. It's you know, we're not interested in finding influences. You know, we did work with William Wairua in 2017. You know, people at that level who are on social media, but we found the biggest bang for our bucks was accessing the local channels where people get their information, and not being blind to those people in Kapahaka who were really widely known. And you know, some of them, you know, Tūmanako, some of those dudes up in the West are pretty connected, and they've, you know, they're trusted as sources of information as well.
Great. Hine, firstly, I'll apologise for calling you an influencer. I will now call you a kaifatu, a community connector. That's your new title that I've given you. But social media, do you use that?
Yes, social media definitely has a place because that's where our target audience is. They will be there and not reading the local rag or watching the TV1 news. So, and Peter, you were absolutely right. You can't just pop up something on online and expect people to be captivated by it if they don't know who you are. So they might not know who I am, or they might not want to vote because of Hine blood, but they may do because of Esther Wainahu with Lyric. You know, voting is a whānau affair. This is not just about an individual. The Māori people that I know who vote, and Pacifica people who vote and are long-time voters, it's because their grandparents did. And their parents did. They were taken to the polling booths and they had to sit in the car, or, you know, Jake. So they understood early on that this is a thing that we've got to do as we get older. And while some of them still don't really understand why they do it because it is a loyalty to their whānau and their parents. Okay, so and I don't, that's good enough for me. You know, if our whānau don't really understand what they're doing, but if they trust in you, then they'll do it. And then we have to do the work about how to explain to them what their options are. And they are not going to read policies. So no, I never say to anyone who says, who should I vote for, Hine? They don't realize that they can vote for a candidate and they don't have to vote for that party the candidate is standing for. There's, you know, there's the Māori option, or there's not. You know, it's just so clumsy. The system is so, it's wrought with barriers unnecessarily, is my view. So I think social media is a tool that in places where I am, we have no choice but to use it. But whoever is the vehicle to provide the information is where the magic happens. And that might not necessarily be me. But we have to make it a whānau affair. There's the little person that you might be able to see on the screen. She is the reason I do what I do and will continue to do, have been doing for 25 years. This is my drive. My drive for this kaupapa is stronger now that I am a grandmother and a great-grandmother than it was when I was raising my children. And we all can see why, the necessity for us to participate in a way, trying to inform our whānau that they have the power in numbers. That's what the system is about. The majority of our whānau who are on a benefit don't realise that the government determine what they are able to do every day of their life. That the government determines, whilst they don't have a job, what type of shoe they can afford to buy their child who needs to go and play rugby and is an amazing little rugby player. So once we're able to kind of, you know, make some of those penetrate some of that thinking for our whānau, it's still difficult because the process doesn't make it easy. They can say, great, okay, I get it, I want to vote. They try to vote, they're not enrolled. Then, they've got to go to the council to fill out the form. It might be valid, might not be, it's unnecessary. So if I could just move quickly on to, because I know time's getting on, but online voting has, if you ask me, what is one of the most sustainable future concepts that we need to be looking at, online voting is absolutely imperative. And why would we not? And I get the security component, but this is about accessibility more than it is about security to some party thinking that they're going to be dwindled out of a few votes. I did a little bit of research, and I'm just going to read this out quickly and then I'll be done. I'm sorry, but I just think this is so... There's been a survey that was conducted by the International Institute of Democracy and Electoral Assistance. Now I'm reading this so I don't get it wrong. So there are different variations of how countries, states and municipalities used it, from all eligible voters to those who live abroad, to those with disabilities, visually impaired, or those with lower literacy levels. And this includes our neighbour, Australia, as well. So all had a higher increase of voter participation. And the Baltic state, who was a pioneer of online voting in 2005, Potaka, they recorded in the 2019 European Parliament elections, 47% of valid votes were done online in 2019. So, I mean, there's lots of examples, and I've kept the link so I can send it to you. But I think that's really some evidence that if we don't practice, or at least put in place a trial period for online voting, then that would say to me that our government is okay with how our citizens are not participating in democracy. That in all my answers to your questions, Ty, online voting, online voting, online voting. Our whānau who no longer live here, their land where they were born, because they've had to go somewhere else for whatever reason that is, they hunger to participate in government elections, because that's the only one that they can. So making it easier for them to participate, because they try, it's just too difficult, too clumsy, chunky. We need to move on. We need to, yeah. I mean, if there are some younger people on screen, I'd love, if anyone's got a question or would like to ask a question, I'm really keen to hear from them as well as just us. I don't know whether we're able to do that type, but I can talk all day on this stuff.
I know. That's great. That's why I invited you. Just from your kōrero, one of the things that popped up for me was around that whānau engagement. And I just remember that I was told once that I could take my children into the voting booth, and I did. And the consequence of that for me was they looked at my voting. I told them not to shout it out while we're in the booth. We just stay quiet and then we leave. But one of the consequences for me was they said, oh, why did you tick that one? And who's that? And why did you tick a different party to the one that you ticked over here? And so those questions were just like the beginning of, for me, it was like, oh, well, this is my reasoning. And obviously they're my children, so I don't talk about their policies and anything. I just said, this person I know, and carried on my kōrero around that. And for me, like, that's a very simple way for a whānau can take their whānau and just say, look, this is what I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing that. Those two questions can just be the beginning. For me, that's my personal opinion around that whole voting process. And they went in, they were young, they were 7, young. They weren't anywhere near that voting age. But I just wanted them to say, this is something I'm participating in, and you'll have this option soon. So let's go and see what it's all about. I didn't really want them to go for their first time into the voting booth by themselves and not know what they're going to look at or see or how it works. But that's my personal thing around the tiny little thing that I did for the election. One thing has popped up, which is sort of we're in our sort of this will probably be our final question, but it's around the longevity. I know that the election's literally starting on Monday, but in terms of often we have that flurry in the year of the election around let's get people voting, let's keep people enrolled. But we have a 3-year cycle. So there's a longevity in terms of getting people engaged in those other years. And so somebody's talked about, does anyone know anyone who has focused on elections in the school system? So that could be part of the answer in this. But how do you do that longevity of getting people interested, like next year when there is no election and the government has been decided? How do you get them involved? I'll start with you, Peter Foaese. How do you do that longevity of getting people involved, engaged in this process?
So for us, we in my community here in Pitaone Te Ao Kairang, it's been about building whānau initiatives that are led by whānau around their mokopuna, and that intergenerational kōrero proliferates everything else that happens. I love that, you know, Tai, how you're talking about taking your mokopuna into that voting booth. And you know, I often encourage adults to actually sit down and have a conversation with their child, whether they're 5 years old or whether they're 15 years old, about the vote, about the, you know, like who is the Green Party and why are these people having these like massive debates online on TV, and you know, what's going on, and why all of a sudden are these massive billboards going up, you know, and cluttering everywhere, and the kids are like, well, what's going on in my playground? Like, you know, like, why are these massive faces everywhere? And it's like, well, actually include your mokopuna in deciding who you're going to vote for. Actually try and get them to tell you who you should vote for, and explain, okay, this guy's doing this and this lady's doing this, and you know, this is what they stand for. Who do you think I should vote for? And have that kōrero. Because what then happens is you're actually doing civics in your home. And then when you go into your community, you then do it as a you know, a multi-layered village of like different whānau who've had their conversations in their homes are now having the conversation together. And that builds, and so I've seen a lot of attempts to find a silver bullet, but there is none in this space. Yeah. It is literally you know, la langa, the whala, like, you know, it is a weaving of multiple layers. And so for me, there's like kids voting in schools where schools can choose to do like a mock election, and they go and kids turn up and they vote for who they think they're going to choose. There's the, you know, youth participatory action research approach, where young people are creating research questions themselves, and they ask those questions about who is the right person to vote for, and then they go out and they canvass their community and they knock on doors and they ask people, okay, what do you think about this person? And they bring that back together, and then they can sort of like put up like a poll and say, well, this is what we think from after canvassing our community. And so there's multiple tools, but I think the main one is longevity requires that this kōrero isn't something that happens every 3 years. It's actually something that happens in the home. And I would be remiss to not, you know, point to the Convention of the Right of the Child, because I work for Mana Mokopuna, you know, the Children and Young People's Commission, and that children have rights. They are full human beings right now. They don't turn into human beings when they're 18. And so we need to treat them as that whole beings right now who have a voice and a say. Article 12 is that right to have a say. Article 13 is that they have the right to express that voice in the way that they want to. How do we weave all of that in together to ensure that when they do get to 18, it's not like all of a sudden they've become something and now they're important. It's actually, I've always been important, and now I have the ability to choose who I think is important in this country. And so I think that's all I can sort of chuck out there right now.
Total.
That's great. We are at the tail end of our kōrero. So do you think I can give you 1 minute to wrap up everything each? Could you stick to 1 minute? Because you've got 3 minutes left. So 1 minute just to say anything that you would like to share with us as we close today. So I'll start with Peter Potaka. Your 1 minute starts now.
Yeah, kia ora. Look, I agree. We're wanting to, one of our initiatives this time round is to learn more about how we appeal to whānau. How do we activate and support whānau discussions? What we're calling whānau, how do we do this? How do we bring that in, support getting information out? And one way we can, for you, Pete, was that we don't wait for 18, we get them at 16.
Oh, well, that's a cliffhanger to just end on, Peter. Thank you. Hine, you've got 1 minute.
Kia ora. Well, in terms of our future, I believe that Māori and Pacifica mothers who, when children are born, the day that they are born, that the parents have the right to enrol their child there and then, so that at the age of 18, they will automatically be generated a voting paper. I believe that local organisations that are funded by government, taxpayer funding, that there is a proportion that is also allocated in a compliance to the contractor to deliver on citizenship, and also that citizenship should be a part of the school curriculum, that our children will earn credits for understanding what the democratic and their citizenship, so that they're winning right from the word go about this thing they call democratic process. And just thank you all. Thank you very much, Ty, for the invitation to be a part of the panel. It's been with an esteemed group, I have to say, and it's also made me realise that we need to do more work, and I'm happy to come back and do further work together. And also thank you very much to our participants. Kia ora.
Thank you. Peter Foaese, you've got 1 minute.
1 minute. When the Make It 16, so the Make It 16 campaign was Mokopuna Tamariki Rangatai saying that actually 16-year-olds should have the right to vote. When they started their campaign, there was this massive national alarm from adults. Oh, we can't let them vote. If we let them vote, they don't pay taxes. No one's gonna, like, they won't do the right thing. They're gonna want to vote for drugs, or there was this corridor, adults were just really scared, and it really made me think, why are you scared when they're your kids? It's your role as the parent to educate them and support them to make the right vote. Why are you so scared of a 16-year-old making a vote? I think I just wanted to start there, is that there's this whole corridor about voting, but actually what it really is about children in our village, and the voter turnout will change and grow if we get into the practice of having genuine, authentic, meaningful relationships and conversations with mokopuna. They will go to vote when they believe that the adults around them believe in them. So I just wanted to wrap it up there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much to all three of you for sharing your knowledge and being generous with your time. I'd just like to close with a karakia as we go on our way. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, tia aio, tia aroha, me te marutau, tihei Māori ora. Thank you, everybody, and happy days.